It has oil, of course, but it didn't always produce oil. It did have natural resources to exploit even before oil. It had timber and it had fish. But that still doesn't explain how even before World War II, a country that had fewer than 4 million people had the fourth largest merchant fleet in the world, almost as large as Japan's, and in the 1930s a larger merchant fleet than Germany or France or Italy. I'll quote briefly from work I found in the Economic History of Norway by a professor named Olav Honningsvall-Gruten. He says, and I quote, that important factors for Norway's ability to turn resource abundance into economic prosperity are an educated workforce, the adoption of advanced technology used in other leading countries, stable and reliable institutions, and democratic rule. Unquote. And I think that Norway does have something to teach other countries, whether or not they are rich in resources. But rich resources alone are, of course, not a guarantee of national success. And even if Norway had fish and timber in the old days, it wasn't all that rich. Its farms were poor and small. Only 3% of Norway is arable land. Now, for some years, I used to visit Cameroon in West Africa, and I worked for a corporation. I used to visit Cameroon frequently. I like Cameroon, and it's rich in resources. It produces and exports a wide range of products. Includes, for example, their exports include petroleum, palm oil, coffee, tea, bananas, sugar, tobacco. It's quite a long list. But unfortunately for Cameroon, these are commodities whose prices are set by economic forces outside Cameroon. And there have been periods when those prices went very low. So, even though the people of Cameroon are, in my experience, gifted and hardworking people, they've had to fight what you might call an uphill battle. Now, I don't know, can the Cameroonians devise some new economic ways in the sense the Norwegians did with ocean shipping? I hope so, but frankly, I don't know what it would be. And Cameroon is beset by other problems, too, that Norway did not have when it was developing. Cameroon, for example, has a dictatorial president, Paul Biya, who's been in power for over 3 decades, and it has a huge amount of corruption. So all this puts Cameroon at number 26 on the failed states list, which means it's worse than several other African countries. All in all, if economic life is a kind of a game, then I have to say that some countries have been dealt bad cards, and some have not known how to play the cards that they have. But life is not exactly a game. Countries like humans can overcome adversity, you know that, and tragic futures can often be avoided. Not always, but often. At the small college in America where I studied, the president of the college would convoke all of us students at the beginning of the academic year. And he'd say, gentlemen, we were all young men, gentlemen, your professors and I are here to tell you what we know. And we also offer you a good library. We offer you the opportunity to learn, and the rest is up to you. And I've always remembered that. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Wesley. If it's more comfortable for you to have a seat, please do.
This is working good.
I wonder if I can be the first to ask a question. You've given us a lot of food for thought, but one of the things that's very much on the minds of people in Kosovo, of course, is the question of recognitions. And I wonder if you could talk a little more about the circumstances of the Somaliland Republic. As I understand it, I don't purport to be an expert on the Horn of Africa. Today's Somalia was formed in 1960 by the merger of 2 former colonies, the former British Somaliland and the Italian Somaliland. The state, the would-be state of Somaliland today is the former British colony, which I understand bases in part their claim to legitimacy on the fact that they were technically independent for 3 days in 1960 when the British gave them independence and before they merged with the Italian colony to form a new combined state. I only know a little about it because in my home state of Maine there is now a population of about 8,000 Somalis, some of whom I've worked with and who come from the north. And who very much want their state there to be recognized by the international community. Given that that is a state, if we can call it that has historically recognized borders because it was a British colony, given that it has, as you've said, a stable democratic government, why does the United States, for example, not recognize it?
And should Kosovo recognize that?
I think that's a key question, and I'm not sure what the answer is. The fact is, de facto, although no other government has legally recognized the Somaliland Republic, a number of countries deal with it. And in the case of the United Kingdom, for example, I don't believe any British ministers have visited the Somaliland Republic, but I think deputy ministers, certainly one or two high-ranking civilian officials, and military officers have visited the country in the last year. A British general to mark a World War II anniversary. A certain amount of foreign aid goes into the Somaliland Republic, some of it from the United Nations, some of it from the United States indeed, and our people, our officials, to my knowledge, go up from the embassy in Nairobi to call on officials of the Somaliland Republic. Mohammed Ibrahim Igal, the first president, I wrote a book about Somalia, and I want to quote from him. Our ambassador then in Djibouti went to call on him, said, "Would you mind if you quoted from your essays?" And he said, "No, not at all." So I think the only reason I really haven't asked the question, to put the question to people in Washington, but I suppose the idea is that theoretically the old Somali Republic is going to come together again someday, but frankly I don't think it is. Of course, there's a third entity which I didn't mention, which is the so-called Puntland Republic of Somalia, which is the northeastern part of the country, which is part of the Italian colony. And that, unfortunately, is the homeland of many of the pirates. And that, I suppose, complicates the situation a little bit. But, I mean, speaking as I do as a purely private citizen, if I were an official of a United Nations member state, I would think very seriously about recognizing the Somaliland Republic.
Thank you. Daphne.
Do I need a microphone or can I project my voice?
Oh, project away, project.
My name is Tina Platza. I work in the UK on behalf of the Norwegians, actually, but I'm doing my PhD work in the UK on discursive construction of national identity, and part of that involves the concept of multiculturalism. For me, from what I've read, and possibly even from people who haven't read it, we notice that many countries, states, empires who have people under their sovereignty that they either try to subordinate, or that they, or those people that don't want to just be part of that tend to fail. And this has happened with Yugoslavia, it has happened with USSR, and it has happened with many, many places, and the Ottoman Empire, and everything. But my question is, in the UK now we have this concept of multiculturalism, and there are people who support it and some who don't, but it isn't actually working. And in Kosovo we have a multi-ethnic country now. And so my question is really, to what extent is the concept of multiculturalism or the concept of multi-ethnicity actually, the way it's being deployed, failing in a way, and then would that have an effect on these states?
Although I say I am rather simplistic in my old age, I want to be careful about generalizing too much. And I guess my offhand reaction is that there's no single good formula that a country may succeed beyond all measure when it is very reluctant to recognize such a fact as a multicultural society. I don't know China very well. I've been there now for many years, but the Han Chinese have certainly been dominant, and they certainly have been restricting, to put it mildly, the rights of other peoples inside the country. But although there's a certain amount of the phrase is potential schadenfreude or something of the sort, that people in parts of the world have often said, well, China won't last somehow. China's going to come apart, China's going to go downhill. I don't think so. I think China's quite a success story, and that in spite of enforcing culturally and linguistically a Han dominance that is not good, say, for Tibet or Xinjiang. I don't know if that begins to answer your question, but as I say, I think there's no single formula. I think that countries may do better and may certainly be happier and certainly from the humane point of view are to be preferred if they permit multiculturalism, and you see many good cases. I think our own. I think the United States is a good example of a country that affords multiculturalism. But there is an ongoing debate in the United States, for example, about the English language. And you will see in many parts of the United States, including Washington, public signs not only in English but in Spanish, sometimes in Vietnamese. Of course, there's a limit. If we use Spanish and Vietnamese, should we not use Chinese? I don't know. There's many, and Somali, there's certainly many Somalis in the United States. So it's a difficult question, but maybe I've begun to give you an answer.
Mike?
Yeah, actually, the famous question usurped mine, but I'd like to drill down a little more on this question. When you talk about, well, first of all, I should say, thanks for a marvelous talk, and thanks for all your service to the country. But when you mention Norway, to what extent is ethnic homogeneity a factor that predisposes one to success, whereas ethnic multiplicity combined with poverty, combined with foreign pressures, combined with God only knows what, I'm looking for, and any academician would be looking for, a formula that has some predictive value. So it's sort of coming at the same question as Delphina's, but from the successful side, to what extent is ethnic homogeneity a factor in success? And then we can start to separate out.
Well, I guess my answer sort of is that homogeneity can be a positive factor, but it's not necessarily an indicator of success. I mean, the Swiss have done quite well over how many years, 700 and something, and in spite of the lack of linguistic unity, although they started out with the German